Hello, everyone. My name is Alena Vandasheva. I'm a coordinator of anti-corruption education at TI Russia. And let me firstly give a short introduction to the topic. Very often, corruption leads to conflicts, and to world conflicts particularly. It weakens the government and separate institutions, and affects the quality of public services. Corruption encourages the pursuit of excessive profits and enhances the social stratification and social distrust. A lot of researchers outline the link between corruption and conflicts, and we can see they do have very similar causes. Countries occupied low positions at Corruption Perception Index usually tend to be more aggressive and initiate conflicts more often, and more likely, those are authoritarian countries. Honestly, we don't have an effective tools against those authoritarian abusers. And there are high corruption risks in the security and defense sector, as we can see almost all over the world. Also, I would like to mention that aggressor states usually exclude data on public procurement and other socially significant information from open registers. That means it's very difficult to control the government to provide any independent monitoring. And we are witnessing these disruptive processes in Russia right now. Regime of secrecy creates perfect conditions for abuse of power and limits the opportunities for our engagement. Sometimes the only thing that we can do during the war conflict as civic activists is collecting evidence and watching. And at the moment, human rights defenders gather information about some actions with features of war crimes and crimes against humanity in Ukraine on behalf of Russian military forces. And this panel is one more opportunity to support Ukraine and to draw attention to those important issues that we included in the agenda of this panel. And right now, it's a real honor for me to introduce our distinguished panelist, Vladislav Nitayev, the head of Dirty Money Stream at Transparency International Russia. Vladislav will provide a short overview of the report on war and corruption. By the way, the printed version of the report is available. We also have a summary of it. And this report was prepared by the team of my colleagues from TI Russia. Alexander Bayenkov, head of international and EU sanctions platform, and he also was a high-ranked diplomat in the mission of Ukraine to EU and member of the Ukrainian sanctions unit. Alexander will highlight how we can fight against corruption warfare by imposing sanctions. Eka Gigauri, the executive director at Transparency International Georgia, board member of Transparency International Global Anti-Corruption Movement, and the steering committee member of the Open Government Partnership. Eka will show us how Russia uses corruption as a hybrid war instrument against Georgia. And Andrei Soshnikov, the chief editor at Sistema, Russian investigative unit, investigative journalist at the Radio Liberty in Prague, thanks to whom we will be familiar with how Russia's aggression in Ukraine is lining the pockets of Putin's elite. That is very intriguing. Thank you so much for joining this panel. And dear participants, we would be glad to engage you in the discussion because it's very important to see a multiple perspective on this complicated problem. And I will open Q&A session after the speech of each panelist. So good luck to everyone. Firstly, I would like to give the floor to Vladislav Nityaev, and we are looking forward to hearing about main findings of the report on war and corruption. You will have 15 minutes about.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to start with a short disclaimer that authors of this report are not in the panel of their security reasons, and I present here the results of work of my colleagues. The work on this report took place from November 2022 to December 2023, and you can read the whole text, the full text of this report on our website, trirussia.org, or in printed version. I think there's some of them here. And I'm ready to start the presentation. Yes, thank you. So the first thing I want to say that highly corrupt kleptocratic system of governance that exists in Russia in many ways cause of this war. Abuse of power by top officials led to concentration of resources in the hands of a small circle of beneficiaries, and this created a situation where war was not controlled by any checks and balances. As recorded by state bodies and prosecutor office, the graph of corruption in context of military-industrial is simultaneous with increase of national defense expenditures, and the monopolization of this military-industrial complex has played an important role. As an example, just one of top 10 companies of military-industrial complex with the highest revenue, only one, Almaz-Antey, is not currently owned by Russian Rostech. And actually, competition within the military industry is currently even worse than in Soviet period. Back then, there were always 3 or 2 maybe competitive design bureaus belonging to different agencies, which creating a more competitive environment, some sort of. In this report, they seen significant limitation and restrictions in public government data, as an example on international trade or property relations. And since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, corruption's risks have increased significantly due to termination or restriction of public assets to budget expenditures, custom statistics, corporate reporting, and real estate registries. In general, corruption as a basis of the current Russian political regime could hardly be the driver of the war, but it was definitely an enabling factor. I will briefly show some data from the report, and I will start with data about corruption in Russian army. So you can see the blue bar that refer to military person convinced of corruption as a main offense, and the red ones are all these convinced of corruption and army force and paramilitary departments. So, and you can see the city growth since 2019 to 2022. And next data is about military expenditure in Russia in general, in millions of United States dollars. You can see that Russia ranks the 3rd globally in terms of absolute values of military expenditures. But if we look at data in relation to GDP, Russia is the biggest military spendings burden in the world. Even if we compare the biggest economy, biggest armies such as United States, China, United Kingdom, India, and France. Yes, and you can see this on this slide. We provided information in persons which related to share of GDP, the blue one, and orange one, share of government spending. And this is the data in 2022. In 2023, Russia has the bigger values in general, in absolute terms, and in relative terms too. Methodologically, we divided our research into three parts, three levels of corruption. First one, petty corruption, second, administrative, and third, grand corruption or political corruption, which includes the beneficiaries of war. And on this slide, you can see the interesting correlation between three parameters. The first one, the green, is a national defense budget in rubles, which is growing, and number of crimes in connection to MAIC grows too, and persons who commit a crime in Ministry of Defense system grows too. And these numbers particularly doubled since 2018 to 2022. And I want to focus on the last part of our research. This is political grand corruption and beneficiaries of war. So the secret services and law enforcement agencies function as one of the primary tools for maintaining and strengthening the Russian kleptocratic system. Oligarchs, top officials of state-owned enterprises, and global kleptocratic networks, all of whom are direct beneficiaries of the war. One prominent example, as I mentioned, is Rostech Corporation. And we can see the profitable government contract serve as a reward for loyalty to the Russian regime. And many businessmen close to government have been benefited greatly. They have bought foreign companies for a really little amount of money. And selective nationalization of these previously foreign assets leads to their redistribution among the businessmen which closest to the government. And at the end, I want to highlight some report findings. So many Russian businessmen were able to enrich themselves from their types with Russian political regime only during this war. Other beneficiaries of war, such as law enforcement agencies, construction firms, and Department of Defense of Russian Defense, receive their share of budget allocations and assets in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. And some firms and persons close to Russian political regime facing international restrictions, sanctions, are even receiving new assets, new gains as a compensation from the Russian state. So at this point, actually, I want to end my brief presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vlad. I guess we learned a lot about this. You can stay here because right now we'll have a Q&A, or if you prefer, of course, you can take a seat.
No, that's okay.
Okay, yeah, because we suggested to use Q&A session just after the speech. And we learned a lot about the consequences of war and about the impact of war on the level of corruption. So right now, I will give the floor to those who are ready to provide comments or ask questions, and our distinguished panelists who also can participate. So let me know if you have any questions or comment. Andre is ready to start. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for this in-depth report. I've read it tonight, yesterday. According to this report, there's no clear connection between corruption and the quality of supplies to the front. My simple question will be, how corrupt the country should be to actually lose the war? If it's a fair question. If not, tell me why.
Actually, me and our team, not military experts, We just saw from the previous academic research and the general international data that you can be a sort of failed state. You cannot provide any government supplies to your citizens, but you can still able to do some terrible things to creation, to some kind of invasion to other countries, etc., etc. I think this PT or administrative level of military corruption can create a lot of problems to Russian army. Yes, but I do not know how to model these effects. I don't know. That's my answer.
Thank you.
Are you satisfied with the answer? Anyone from the audience, would you like maybe to clarify this idea or answer the question of Andrei or ask your questions? Ask, please. Yeah, Mohammed, go ahead.
Yes, so I'm with Transparency International Defense and Security, and actually this is the point that we try to make, is linking corruption to conflict, and it's a vicious circle. So the more a country is corrupt, especially in the defense sector, the more conflicts arise because it creates profit. But also, we've seen a lot of cases of testimonies in other countries. So the biggest defeat in the century is in Mosul in Iraq, and it was mainly due to corruption. We have like ammunition that doesn't work, military equipment that's very faulty because of the way the public procurement is done on that, and due to corruption. So corruption does have a big impact on military operations, so let's say military effectiveness, but I mean, of course, that's not the point that we try to put forward, but if you're interested in this, we have a report called The Fifth Column that looks at very different ways that corruption and conflict intertwine, and there are clear links between corruption and military operations and how it affects it. It can really, like the fall of Afghanistan is due to corruption as well. So there are many examples in the world of how corruption affects military operations. And also conflicts create a lot of opportunities for corruption, as you've rightly showed in your businessmen having access to profit due to the war. That's also, it's really a vicious circle, and we have to find ways to.
Thank you so much for this significant point, Mohammed. And I really think that if the war wouldn't start if the level of corruption wouldn't be so high in Russia. But it's just my personal opinion. Anyone else from the audience? Would you like to ask any questions or provide your comments? Yeah, there is Benes. Oh, sorry. Okay, Grisha will be the next, and then he will give the floor to you.
I wanted to provide a remark on the Andrei's question. So it is indeed that corruption influences the military power. No one argues that. But there are a lot of other factors which influence military capability. You know, Israel had significant issues with military supplies at the beginning of war in Gaza. There was tons of reports in Israeli media about how soldiers lacked of supplies, of equipment, of first aid kit. It was really terrible. But Israel, of course, is much less corrupt than any post-Soviet country, except the Baltic states. And another issue, of course, is the resources which you have. You know, Russia has a lot of money, like extreme amount of money. They can waste this money everywhere we can. You know, for example, Iran has significant issues with its oil revenue. North Korea has significant issues with their budget. Does it mean they won't attack neighboring countries? No, but would they have significant problems? Not the problems which Russia had? Yes, because they really unstable financially. And also, of course, in the presentation, you have seen that there was a significant increase in corruption prosecution cases, and it is not in this presentation, but now we know that in this May there was a purge in Russian Ministry of Defense. Several people were fired and arrested, and the Minister of Defense was changed. So that basically means there are some corruption controls. Of course, they're absolutely ineffective, absolutely inadequate, but that means that some part of money that they spend on war, it actually goes on war. And because you have a lot of money, you can produce war. You can't win in this war. That's why it's going on for 2 years. But you have enough money and resources and discipline to continue this war. And of course, this is a very unhappy conclusion, but I think it answers on your question to some extent.
Yeah, thank you, Grisha, for this clarification. Please don't forget to introduce yourself. Yeah, Benas, there was a question on the last row.
Hi, Marie Pejikoshwa from UNODC in Fiji. I also have a question in relation to the corrupt environment of Ukraine before the war happened. So how you think the corrupted environment in Ukraine might have contributed to war happening and to the war continuing as well?
In Ukraine, I mean.
Yeah, I know it's not exactly this question, but it's a bit to be the devil advocate. We are focusing here on Russia,
Yes.
but there were corruption in Ukraine before. There might still be corruption in Ukraine. So how did this contribute to the continuation or to the occurrence of the war?
Yeah, it's better. Yeah, I guess it's better to readdress this question to Alexander, if you don't mind. Okay. Yes, please, Alexander.
Thank you very much for this important question. But I would like thank you very much for this important question. I would like to maybe to draw more attention on this during my presentation because it's quite. It would be much more
logical,
much more larger answer than short here, and just to not keep Vladislav there on the stage.
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess we have the opportunity to ask one more question, and then we will go further to Alexander's presentation. Anyone else? If not, I will yield the floor to Alexander, and we are looking forward to seeing your position, of course, and to know more about the role of sanctions and how effective they are, or why they are not effective enough. And you will have 10 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you very much, first of all, for invitation. Thank you very much for drawing this attention to this very important topic, war and sanctions and the corruption as well. And thank you very much for audience for this active, activity, because the end of the second day of the conference, I would understand that it's not so easy to be active at this stage. But nevertheless, I would like to start from the comments on the presentation. Thank you very much for this comprehensive and interesting research. Just a few words. I fully agree with Vlad that sanctions imposed, unfortunately, do not lead to changing the behavior of Russian elites that supporting this war. And then might be a number of reasons. First of all, being jailed or being killed. I think also that corruption was not a root case of this war, but the elite-driven corrupted system headed by the one person for many years in power and based on the full-fledged propaganda in the country. That was something that led to this war, I think. And at the same time, regarding the maybe incentives or positives from the sanctions coalition society or European Union, there is already one of the example that recently co-founder of Yandex, Arkady Volosh, who condemned Russian aggression in Ukraine, was delisted from the EU sanctions. Maybe this is an exception. Maybe this is something that we would see as the positive way of sanctions policies towards those involved in those supports aggression. But nevertheless, at this stage, this kind of very, very difficult political decision should be, and let's see what would be the Obviously, corruption in Ukraine before 2014 was among the reasons for degradation and extremely low readiness of the Ukrainian army, as in your report as well, for war with Russia starting from 2014. Against the background of general trends reducing the size of army and conventional weapons, as well as depriving Ukraine of military nuclear weapon, corruption in the state authorities created opportunities for the large-scale arms sales schemes, thefts in the army with the silent consent of the law enforcement officers, of course. Even during the time of the first presidents of Ukraine, an oligarchy emerged as the consequence of and a part of privatization in Ukraine, which contributed to the shifting of, let's say, shadow capital to the economy of Ukraine and creation of vertical corruption system in order to control strategic spheres, strategic industries, for example, energy, transport, steel, engine building, etc., etc. Special export companies were also created with sold of weapons at a frantic pace, allowing to benefit for those involved. They were managed by high-level officials, as ex-president Yanukovych, his son, his family, defense ministers, heads of those companies, who had at the same time Russian passports at this time. This strengthening of the presence of the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Federation in Crimea, with an extension to 25 years until 2042 under Kharkiv agreements of 2010, also significantly weakened the ability of Ukraine to defend itself. Thus, operation to seize Crimea, to occupy part of Donbas region, were well planned, and during 10 years, I think, maybe more, with the help of those personalities like Yanukovych, Lebedь, Solomatin, Zamana, and others played their shadow roles in the further occupation, supporting the development of corruption, of course, in the country. That led where we are. There is some interesting fact that based on the results of pre-trial investigation of the State Bureau of Investigations of Ukraine, 5 main episodes of crime were identified on those criminals that I said. First of all, criminal reduction of the armed forces of Ukraine, undermining the state of mobilization and readiness to mobilize the army, destruction of air defense systems in Crimea, illegal organizational changes and leveling of strategic defense documents, failure to take measures to respond to external threats. So we see here just a number of concrete things that corruption just very strictly related to those activities in our country. Another person, Viktor Medvedchuk, was actively using political parties and media outlets controlled by him. For example, Channel 112, News 1, etc., etc. Then they were opposed by, they are sanctioned by European Union and our partners. And even recently, the EU stopped broadcasting of one of the Medvedchuk channels, Voice of Europe, that was used also to spread disinformation and propaganda in Europe. I would say that some of our partners that time in the 90s also did not consider the armed Ukraine with rather weak state institutions. Therefore, they contributed to the deprivation of Ukraine's nuclear weapon in exchange for the dubious guarantees enshrined in the Budapest Memorandum of 1994, reduction of arms in framework of the international organization and instruments, as well as delay in increasing sanctions pressure even on the eve of full-scale aggression. For a long time, before the full-scale aggression, we're insisting on introduction of so-called anti-corruption sanctions regime, which is on my personal mind in that time during the building up of Russian troops along our borders could demonstrate the clear and strong position of the EU and international partners as a reaction to the potential Russian aggression against Ukraine. And I'd like to underline that thanks to the European Union and international partners, several packages of sanctions were imposed immediately after aggression started. And then, as well as huge financial, humanitarian, military support was also provided. So, yes, today we have 13 packages of sanctions, and we are working together closely from a perspective of our organization, closely with our European partners to impose the 14th package to synchronize sanctions not only against Russia but against Belarus. But at the same time, huge potential still there within the framework of these balanced sanctions in the world, because we don't have any UN Security Council sanctions now, and this disbalance leads us to let's say, the broad area for circumvention, for avoidance of sanctions through third countries. And we are closely cooperated with the European Union to use the instrument imposed in the 11th package of sanctions to sanction the third countries and companies from third countries for evasion, for circumvention. And even just yesterday, Mr. O'Sullivan, special representative of the EU, visited Kazakhstan, and with maybe already good comments from his side on the declining of some operations and grey exports, etc., through Kazakhstan territory. I would not be so long too much, but in a few points, just if I may. Currently, current state about the anti-corruption sanctions, that the discussion in the EU already started. It's much closely that we expected before, but such sanctions we could also impose within the framework of two other regimes. It's a regime just newly established after Alexei Navalny assassination in Russia, and EU global human rights sanctions regime as well. But it's not so effective now, even for violations of human rights in Ukraine, unfortunately. But still a lot of to do. So, just briefly summing up, in the first days of war, corruption in Russia prevented aggressors' ability to seize more territory of Ukraine, be fair. Nevertheless, Putin's regime, relying on a powerful corruption structure, concentrates all possible means and ways and sources to continue the war. Many sectors of Russia's economy and industry have been already reorganized in accordance with the military needs. At the same time, unfortunately, there is still no adequate resistance in the country, or even sufficient understanding of the fake reality in which Russia exists among the Russian population. Thank you very much. I will stop here to allow us to discuss a bit.
Thank you very much, Alexander, for these significant points and answering your question. So it was a large-scale corruption, particularly the grant corruption. And right now, I would like to ask firstly our panelists, do you have any questions, or would you like to provide any comment?
I do, actually.
Okay, okay, Andrei, please go ahead.
It's an interesting point about sanctions on third countries. Let's say a company from Kyrgyzstan helps to avoid sanctions to Russian beneficiary of war. What would be the mechanism to sanction this company, specific company, and how EU should consult with the local governments on how to implement these sanctions? Or it's just a solo decision by European stakeholders?
We are going deep to the mechanism.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a very interesting question because we are working with all of our partners here there in Brussels to make this instrument effective and even a bit alive. But for the moment, there is only some companies were listed by the EU from third countries. Unfortunately, this is only a few ones. How to do this mechanism, how to implement this. In the EU legislation, if I correctly remember this kind of 3 points. First of all, the measures against company. Because before the 11th package in the EU was very strict policies regarding the sanction out of the jurisdiction, and this is the first maybe first step towards this, let's say, extra jurisdiction sanction. They are not naming them. Then the second point is to address the government of this country to stop the evasion. And then after that, if the country is not reacting, it could be the trade and other measures involved and imposed against this country at any level of economy, trade, of economic cooperation, or just in the sector. In the sector, definitely they are doing this activities of circumvention of sanctions.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this clear explanation. I guess really, so regarding your last point, that's what we exactly do. We try to raise awareness about instruments, about the situation, and I guess it's very important.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I
Vlad.
guess firstly Vlad, and then I will give the floor to representative of our participants.
One sum up about these second level of sanctions. I mean, for third countries, as an example, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, etc. And the city, great example from United States, second level sanctions, and from Turkey. We saw from the trade data and our source of data that Turkish companies and companies in the other third countries really afraid of sanctions. As an example for banks, sanctioned banking system. American, United States sanction, it's really threatening them. And in 2024, maybe at the end of 2023, we saw the really limited shipments from these countries. And I think that's a great approach in terms of European Union restrictions, maybe too, to create a lot of problems for Russian military system in dual-use shipments and for war beneficiaries in Russia. That's just a point of view.
Yeah, maybe I would
like to react
just to add to complement what you said. We are very closely working on this is the utmost priority for us to stop the production of weapons, to stop the supplies of weapons. The problem is to trace the supply chain. Unfortunately, we know the company, we know the number of components, we know how it looks like, etc., etc. We know the final destination or end user, but we don't know the chain. So the chain is the most difficult, let's say, to identify. More or less, this kind of restrictions that you mentioned on the banking system, they are also not enough because in Russia there are more than 14 or there's 15 banks already listed, but unfortunately there are more than 140 banks, and for example Gazprom Bank is not under sanctions yet. On the banking system, we should impose both sanctions: individual ones to freeze the assets, and from other side to SWIFT them from the transaction activities in the world. And for energy, just a few words. On energy in the EU, unfortunately, we have only coal embargo full coal embargo, and then only unilateral measures on gas, natural gas transit, no on energy sanctions, and no sanctions against nuclear sector. So it's quite a huge potential to finance war.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alexander. So, do you have any questions, dear participants? No questions, at least right now. So thank you very much, Alexander. It was very interesting, and now I guess we know more particularly about problems in the field of sanctions. And our discussion wouldn't be complex without the view on behalf of Georgia. And if you ever visited this country, you could see the very popular T-shirts with the sign, 20% of my country is occupied by Russia. That's a sad reality. And recent adoption of law on foreign agents resulted in an intensive process, and we definitely need a clear explanation of these developments. And I guess Eka is the best person who can do that. Eka, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this opportunity. So, yes, I would say Georgia is in the unique situation that because first we had war with Russia, and at this moment we are also in the hybrid war, I would say, with Russia. So, when talking about our experience, and I was listening to our colleagues, you know, when the Soviet Union collapsed, I think that this was kind of the general understanding in Georgian society that now we should become really independent country. And we should not follow these logics that at that time the Russian government had, that you can develop without having good relations with us or without being under our influence. And we said that we can show to everyone, and especially to the post-Soviet countries, that the country can develop without being under the influence of Putin's regime. And if we choose our own way of development, and if we say that, you know, we are going to the direction of the EU and NATO membership, and we can implement anti-corruption reforms or other democratic reforms, so we are able to do this. Apparently we did that, right? So in 2003, when we had the Rose Revolution, we actually showed to the whole world, but also to the post-Soviet countries, that it's possible. It's possible if there is political will. It's possible to eradicate corruption in, 3 months' time, even in the police. This is what we did. And it's possible to build the country. And it's possible to advocate for the European future of the country. However, of course, we all acknowledge that there is threat. And there is threat, which is our neighboring country and their desire to put us again under the influence. To export corruption in our country, to use the disinformation mechanism and methods to undermine the democratic institutions in Georgia, like maybe support the far right groups also on the territory of Georgia, so which will again undermine the development of the country and all that. So. And definitely, however, I should say that at that time, we would not still expect that Russia officially will invade Georgia. So, and definitely after 2008 and the invasion in 2008 was the big obstacle in the development of Georgia. And although we were showing the very remarkable results again in implementing democratic reforms in our country, definitely this was big obstacle. And after that, we started kind of realizing that the influence of Russia is growing, and one of the very important mechanisms that they had at that time is, of course, to make sure that we will have corrupt government in Georgia, and definitely we have it now. This is a big problem, I should say, and definitely when there is corruption in the country, it helps. In case of Georgia, of course, it helps to strengthen the kind of influence of Russia on the territory of Georgia. We see that all this disinformation, also techniques that are used in Georgia are well known for the world, and we call it Putin's playbook. I'm sure those who are not from the post-Soviet countries still, they heard about the global war party. Right, so this kind of expression that is used by the Russian government and now is used by our government, that you would recall that someone is talking about these terrible liberal groups who are, like, you know, undermining the state interests. About the role of civil society in different countries, who care only about the LGBT rights and never have the contacts with the population on the ground and never help the population, anyone. So, of course, and this is actually like really populistic approach, and the message is that for the regular citizens who don't have enough information and education, I would say, would believe in. Of course, you might hear the messages in relation of this critical media saying that why this critical media is always talking about the negative things. And what is this, like, you know, they should talk about the positive things as well. So why they see only negative developments in the country, right? So that's also kind of used, I'm sure, when this foreign agents law was adopted in 2012 in Russia. So you had the same kind of justifications for shutting down the critical media there, and now we are experiencing the same. Definitely, you would also hear about the family values and the kind of the traditional values, and everybody else outside of your country, like the US and EU, is fighting against your family member values and the culture and everything, and they just want to force you to forget your own language even, right? So this might hear like crazy things, but unfortunately these were used by the Russian government at some point, and now is using by our government to justify the fight against the like civil society, critical media, and people who are fighting for freedom and democracy. Yes, so these are the tools that are used at this moment by the Russian government, I would say, on the territory of Georgia. And again, by supporting this current government that we have in Georgia, definitely, and by ensuring that they will maintain in power forever, they can be sure that they will win this fight, and of course they will put Georgia under their influence, and they will make everything for our country to develop. So yes, this is where we are now. I would say that this backsliding and unfortunate development that we observe with the foreign agents law, by the way, in Georgia we call it Russian law.
Russian law.
So we see that it does not put us in a good kind of situation. However, I think that we still have chance to resist, and maybe because of those reforms that we implemented back in 2003. And maybe because at that time we were smart enough to start building the independent institutions, which are at this moment captured in Georgia by one political party, but still we see that it's not kind of monolithic system in Georgia. We still observe that there are individuals in different institutions who are resisting. Yeah. And if they can't do anything inside of the institution, at least they can leave this institution and say openly that they can't sign under this backsliding in Georgia, which is very remarkable thing. And that's why every time someone is asking us the question whether Russia wins or the Putin wins on the territory of Georgia, so we say no, because still we have these very brave individuals, including in the civil society and independent media, but also in the public sector, who still at this moment can resist. Mm-hmm. However, of course, we expect also that maybe something will happen that will again make our lives more difficult. But anyway, so I think that still at this moment we can be optimistic about the future of our country. And what I also wanted to say, I actually congratulate you with your report, because it's I think for many people who look at the developments in Russia, in Georgia, or in other countries, sometimes for those who did not go through this, for them it's very difficult to understand how difficult it is to fight for the democracy of your country, and then at some point that you have leave your country and still continue doing this. So congratulations with your report, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Eka. Let's keep fighting. And thank you particularly for the outlining the role of political will and the transborder character of corruption, and this necessity to have a capacity, particularly the capacity of civil society, and try to continue this fight. So now I will open the floor. Maybe Alexander will be the first, and then Andrei, and then Alexander, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'd like just to comment from the perspective of Eastern Partnership, because I was following this issue in the past, and the TRIO project as well. Just to make it clear, TRIO is Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova within the Eastern Partnership Initiative. Is cooperation with the EU, and I was drafting the final declaration of Eastern Partnership Summit in 2020. It was interesting that we couldn't even put there some our initiatives, three of us, through missions, three government, etc. Then we signed the Batumi Declaration, etc. But then the space has changed, and unfortunately for me, we don't have any such cooperation, enhanced cooperation with those countries within the EU. But we have another initiative. We have 3 countries on board towards the European integration, and just let me express my sincere, thanks for Georgians' position. thanks for the civil society position, and wish you good luck in the space. Let it be together with Georgia in our board.
Thank you. And thank you. And unfortunately, we can't say the same about our government, but I can assure you that the Georgian people is supportive to Ukraine. We have several thousand people fighting on the side of Ukraine. And this is for many Georgians and for the majority of Georgians, for all of us, it's our fight, really. Slava Ukraini.
Yeah, and by the way, I forgot that I would like to react to the to your point about the same rhetoric and about the same tools, and that is called in the political science authoritarian learning. Like authoritarian leaders, they learn from each other how to use this tool to suppress people, and I guess right here we discuss how we can work against it. Yeah.
Can I react on this?
Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, I think that whatever is happening, and tomorrow we'll have the panel on this foreign agents law and, these legislations that are using against the civil society in different countries. So, and I think that it's very obvious example what happened in Russia with the civil society there. And, my honest kind of observation is that even now, for many countries who are investing in democracy around the world, it's not understandable, what is going on and what might be the impact and what might be the results of such legislation in different countries. And I can't say that we have such legislation only adopted in Russia, and it's like now in Georgia and maybe in other countries, but it's like it's all over the world. It's like in Bangladesh, it's in other countries as well, and so. And then we see that apparently those kind of laws are used by the authoritarian regime to to shut down the civic groups. And then we see that there are no proper reactions from the side of the the countries like the US or the EU and others. So this is very concerning. I think that in case of Georgia, we were lucky enough to have some very painful for our government, at least the painful reactions. But if we look at other countries, the democratic countries were extremely slow in reacting. Yeah. So, we might have many examples, but then does it help? I mean, no, because still we did not learn on our mistakes. This is the reality.
Yeah. At least we can raise our voices right now against this law. Yeah. Andrei was next.
Not trying to capture everyone's time, but I'm genuinely interested. Yeah.
Susan
Rose Ackerman, the classic scholar of corruption,
anti-corruption.
Anti-corruption.
Maybe corruption and anti-corruption.
Once came up with the formula of government corruption. It's a lack of control.
It's Robert Kliegler.
Lack of information provided by the state for the society, and the legal framework that allows the state to make unlimited decisions, basically. I'm not an expert on Georgia, but in my humble opinion, Georgia is doing fine with all these components because civil society is strong, the state is legally democratic. What's going on and what point exactly is the most crucial for Georgia right now? Lack of control, lack of information, or legal frameworks?
Oh, now is that our state is captured by the oligarch. That's what is going on. So I don't know if you are aware of Mr. Ivanishvili, who made his fortune in Russia in the late 19th, and so now he actually has all these individuals who are serving him personally. So, like, for instance, our Minister of Interior is his former bodyguard. Our Minister of the head of our Secret Services worked for his bank. So, for many years, we had his personal doctor as a Minister of Healthcare. So, I mean, from the beginning, when he took over the power, it was the coalition. So, there were many parties. So, and people have not realized that, something is going on. But at some point, then we all, have realized that, he's putting his personal kind of servants on different positions. So I think that in case of Georgia, again, we had very unique anti-corruption reforms there, and we tried to eradicate petty corruption in several months' time in police, in customs, in different institutions. I was in charge of the reforms in border police of Georgia, so I was the deputy head of border police. Everyone was so young at that time.
Yeah, that's why it's so effective.
It was
still.
it was like really unique time for Georgia.
Yeah.
But the problem with us was still that we were looking at particular areas where we could eradicate corruption, but we did not look at some point at the whole system of checks and balances. And this is very important when you start reforming, when you start implementing the anti-corruption reforms in the country, that not only you should eradicate corruption in different areas, but also you have to look at the whole system and make sure that, you have the checks and balances system, that you have strong parliament, the independent judiciary, this and that. So this is where we were not really very good. I mean, I would say that, yes, we were successful, but not in all areas. So that's why when Mr. Ivanishvili took over the power, apparently we have realized that we don't have the independent judiciary. So, and then those judges who were serving the previous administration now started serving this one. So, and then again, then he got the constitutional majority in the parliament, and then parliament failed in conducting the effective oversight role over the executive branch. So this is this actually helped him to capture the state. This was the problem there. But what helped us is that, and now during all these demonstrations, when I was looking at these students and these young people, many of them motivated, big patriots of Georgia. So when I was looking at them, then I have realized that we have the whole generation in Georgia, which was born in the independent Georgia, where they never experienced corruption. I mean, the petty corruption and such things. Even when I'm meeting these different, students groups, and us from the former Soviet, when I'm explaining that you had to pay bribes to get the ID, for them it's just not understandable. They just do not even know how it's possible to pay something to register the land plot. And this is what helps us, I think, at this moment, that we have totally new generation, educated in the West, understanding how the Western system is built and functioning. And I'm sure that
Thank you for elaborating it. I guess we have time for one question from the audience, and then Vlad would like to provide the comment, and then we will go further. So, dear participants, do you have any questions? Yeah, there is a question. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alexei. I'm Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer in the private sector. To your question about looking at small things and not the big picture, what would you have done differently now, knowing it, back in the days, in terms of looking at the big picture?
This is question, yeah.
Yes.
So, again, yes, what I said this already. Maybe I should say that we were very young. I mean, our ministers were 28, 29 years old. We all just gave, like, we all just took over these different governmental institutions. We were very motivated, less experienced, and trying to fix these things, everything together, and thinking that now it's the chance for our country to build, to make our country different, and all this. It was different motivation. We don't see such motivation now, but it was something different, the different vibe, I would say, everywhere. But at the same time, it brings this, at some point when you are extremely successful, then you think that, oh, you know better what should be done. And you are starting, ignoring different opinion, thinking that, yeah, I did this well, I was extremely successful, now I know better. And all these other people who are telling me some different things and maybe complaining, they just do not understand. Because I'm here, I worked hard, and I did all these things. So, and maybe this was the kind of our weakness, that we were so self-confident a lot, really very kind of maybe brave at some point, but then also we had this huge confidence in our decisions and activities. And maybe I would persuade others also, being in the parliament, for instance, of my age, again, everyone very young, saying that, it's better to adopt the laws or and build this system which will exist, does not matter who will be in power or not. And this long-term decision, which is which might have impact after several years, maybe to have the focus on such things more. However, I can also understand that if we would not be so brave, we would not have such results. I mean, it's really unique not to have petty corruption in 3 or 4 months' time in police. So that's something.
And taxi drivers prove it still. Thank you so much. So, Vlad, please provide your brief comment, and then we will go further to the report of Andrei.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to emphasize to paying attention to these red flags, like introducing this type of foreign agent law, Russian law, some may be called anti-corruption laws, and government can even explain it in good terms. But actually, we experienced this law in 2015. Transparency International Russia was named as a foreign agent, and they can see right now what this means. Yeah, back then. So I just want to say thanks for your work and your fight, and I hope and Georgian society and Transparency International Georgia do the best to avoid this kind of abuse of power, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess the reaction of Georgian society is very impressive. So, Andrei, the next controversial issue is it really necessary to provide any investigations, and particular anti-corruption investigations, during the wartime? And Andrei has an impressive experience in this field, so I hope we will have an answer. Please.
Very distinguished panel indeed. I'm happy to be here. I've learned a lot today.
We need the presentation?
Yes, please. A presentation, the last one. For this meeting, I'd like first to make a short poll for the audience. Please raise your hand, everyone who thinks that corruption actually influenced the decision of Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine. Please raise your hand, those who think that corruption has nothing to do with the decision of Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine. One person. It's very much
50-50.
It very much depends from the room you're in and the topic is discussed, because many also distinguished experts would say that nationalism, imperialism, a decision of one man influenced the full-scale invasion mostly, and corruption maybe created some basis for the invasion or for elite behavior during the invasion, but not a main factor indeed. I'm not here to argue with any of these opinions because I'm not sure myself, to be honest, but I think I will try to provide you some additional material to think about. It's not a real question, actually. It's a rhetorical statement. Russia's aggression in Ukraine is lining the pockets of Putin's elite. Right now, there are so many ways how elite can benefit from the war. That's why EU implementing these sanctions against beneficiaries of war. I'm a journalist. I'm not in decision-making process, but I remember how during the first months of full-scale invasion, we were so focused on the situation on the front lines and the horrific crimes committed by the Russian army that we almost forgot about our common suspects, about people who we were investigating for so many years. Russian businessmen with ties to Kremlin, Russian elite. We thought at first glance that this is not important anymore, that these oligarchs and their shady schemes has nothing to do with these horrific crimes. But the last few years, maybe couple of years, for me was a time of understanding that actually these shady schemes are one of the pillars of the whole Kremlin system, because this elite can provide infrastructural help to the war, financial help to the war, and last but not least, propaganda help to the war. There is a striking but a bit exaggerated quote by Russian political scientist. Please don't understand this quote literally, but it's a good red pill, blue pill situation, you know? If you do anything important in Russian society, once someone will knock at your door and ask this question, either a bullet in the head or $1 million in cash. And let's talk about those who choose $1 million in cash. According to Project Media, one of the greatest Russian investigative media, more than 50% of people on the top of the Forbes most rich businessmen of Russia benefit from the war directly or indirectly. This information was gathered via just open source. Just to give you an idea, most of the Russian defense procurement is secret. So it's maybe even more than 50% of Russian oligarchs or so-called oligarchs that benefit from the war. Our Ukrainian colleague covered the topic of sanctions, and I think both of these groups, old money and new Putin's elites, must be sanctioned. They were all involved in the war to some extent. But we need to understand the difference. The difference is here on the screen. So who do you think suffers the most from the sanctions between these two groups? Who thinks that old Russian oligarchs who made their fortune in the 1990s suffer mostly from the sanctions? Who thinks that new Putin's elite, these bureaucrats with ties to the secret services who are sometimes younger, sometimes not, but more depend from the state, suffer mostly from the sanctions?
Me.
It's interesting because, in my opinion, the first group suffers and the second group benefits.
Oh.
Yeah. So what exactly is happening here? old money is trying to lose any connection with Russia. They're now American or Israeli or Latvian businessmen. They create trusts that cannot be checked by anyone. They invest to startups via proxies. They forgot about their Russian assets. They lose some of their yachts or some of their villas. But new Putin's elites, the second group, are the ones who actually provide services to the state at this moment. And this list of the ways how it benefits from the war is not complete. There are so many ways, actually. For instance, just some examples. You can provide rail cars for transporting ammunition to the front. You can develop software to protect secret data of secret services. You can refuel tanks. You import microchips into the country bypassing the sanctions, etc., you name it. And these are some of the beneficiaries. There were lots of international companies, conglomerates, that were operating in Russia with a headquarters somewhere on the west. Now these are all Russian companies. Not all, but many of them, because the state can make a decision not even to nationalize these former Western countries, but to give it to someone close to the Kremlin. Here is the guy, a typical example of the new Putin's elite. He's not young, he's connected to secret services, but he made this fortune because of close ties with Vladimir Putin, and now he had an addition in his investment portfolio of these two Western companies. So the guy on the right is your typical war criminal, and now if you buy a yogurt in Russia, you can benefit your typical war criminal. So this guy on the right is the main person who provides military camouflage to the Russian army, is now not just the owner of the main beer company, but also the brand of Carlsberg, which you all know. And even the looting can become a business in Russia. These are a few examples, and again, the typical war criminal is involved here. This is the document that the state sent, regional authorities actually sent to the businessmen that have close connections with these regional authorities. This one exactly is from St. Petersburg, my hometown, and the local businessman provided me this list. It's actually a huge document, many pages, of legal entities on the occupied territories, Ukrainian territories occupied by Russia, that are now ownless, according to them. Actually, the real owners of this entity are either somewhere else or killed by Russian armies. So there are many legal names, and you can basically become an owner of any of these companies, and it even says it's just 15 kilometers from a combat zone, guys. It's quite safe, invest. The situation can change any moment, but there is an interest of this in business community. And just a small example, it's nothing really big actually. That's something we found yesterday. and I wanted to show it to you. So this woman is the regional representative of United Russia ruling party in Ivanovo region of Russia. Her father is one of the main sponsors of United Russia. He owns a leasing company. On her social media, she supports the war, of course, but on her Instagram, she posted pictures from her holiday time in Paris. She even put a geographical tag for us to understand this. It says Montmartre.
Enjoy.
Yeah. So for many people, nothing even changed. They live their lives like nothing happened. And for most of Russian elite, especially new elites, that's exactly how it works. So I cannot provide you answers, but I can ask the main questions. How long it can continue? And if you want to communicate with me or provide any interesting idea for possible investigations, feel free to use this email. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Andrei, for this showable presentation. And I really like this way because we can use fact-checking right now. And yeah, thank you for this evidence. I guess it's one of the main aim of any investigation, to provide evidence that we can use maybe later, but we hope we will use it, and particularly in the international courts. So I will open the floor for the last round of questions and answers. Who is ready to start it? Speechless. Yes, please. Oh, sorry, Alexander. Okay, maybe, firstly you, and then Alexander. It doesn't matter.
Hi, I'm Matt Steinglass from The Economist, and that was a fantastic presentation. I wanted to just ask, you raised a really interesting question right at the beginning, that there was this sense about a decade to 12 years ago that corruption was both the main motivating factor behind Putin-style authoritarianism and one of the main tools of Putin-style authoritarianism. And it really does feel like things have shifted. I mean, that was a very convincing presentation about the role that corruption still plays as a motivating factor. But in your thinking also, or in the thinking of the rest of the panel, don't you think at this stage that we now feel that there's a lot more real autonomous solidity to Russian nationalism or nationalism in general as a driving motivator for war and for Putin-style authoritarianism than we would have, say, 10 years ago?
I'm not a political scientist, but I think that Russian system is not actually a vertical system that Putin's tried to create. It's actually a system of many factors that sometimes oppose each other. So, of course, even in the elites, there are we call them turbo-patriots, who they really are ultra-nationalists. And people who dream actually for the war to end and go in the old good days of the peace or relative peace in Europe. Both of these groups, both of these poles can benefit from corruption indeed. So I'm still thinking whether the corruption works the same way for both of these groups. They're all involved in corruption to some extent. But when the war started, I think everyone were so scared, both of these groups, about their future, about future of their assets, about the future of the company, that there was a really chaotic situation. You cannot distinguish one from another. It's just mess, mess. And there is no simple answer for this.
Yeah. If you have an opinion, you can provide it. Would you like? No? Yeah. No? Okay. So Alexander was the next, and then, we will give you the opportunity to ask.
Thank you for very interesting, and applause just underlining this. And I'd like to ask about the private assets. It's much more understandable for who is suffering from sanctions now. Of course, it's old elites and now new elites just elaborating new schemes and patterns to avoid this, to having some new methods of new methods of transferring money, etc. But I would like to ask you whether you have some opinion. Sorry, it's technically not so possible to turn. Do you have something in mind about the sovereign assets confiscation, the confiscation of Russian sovereign assets? What is your opinion, position, or what is your perspective on that?
Can you give me an example of sovereign assets?
Sovereign
that
assets,
can be
it's
confiscated?
200 billions of Russian money in Europe, for example, now in deposit.
I think
Euroclear.
I don't have an opinion. I'm a journalist, but I can provide you what I think is a consensus among Russian independent civil society, that this money should go to reconstruction of Ukraine.
Yeah, the most spread opinion. Okay, Eka, is it okay if, or, okay, Eka, please provide your opinion or question, and then.
I was just thinking when listening to this presentation, which is a very interesting one. And again, I raised this issue with the foreign agents law, right? So, but when talking about this, the Russian oligarchs and the officials, they are now, some of them, as you said, but even previously, being involved in corruption. And I don't know how many years the TI Russia exists, more than 20 years, right? So, and the guys you were talking about, particular individuals involved in corruption, enriching themselves, violating human rights, and this and that. And then these people at the same time would go to Europe, open the accounts there, navigate in this, the Western system without any problems, buying the property, doing this, giving the nice education to their children. And there was no reaction. Nothing was done at that moment. So even when Russia invaded in Georgia in 2008, at some point, the West started reset with Russia, with Putin. Expecting from him that he might change. And we were saying at that time that next is Ukraine, that you can't change the guy, and then now of course it's extremely difficult to find all the assets and to make them responsible, because they were using tens of years to learn the Western system and to enjoy this system, and to make sure that their assets will not be found so easily. So I think that this is something that we should think about, and this is what TI was talking about all over the years.
Yeah, from 1999.
Look at the banking system. Look at the money laundering schemes. Look at the these systems that are used by the corrupt officials in the West. And unfortunately, we had, number of very important resolutions, which were very nice on the paper, but no one was not no one, but in most of the time, so were not implemented properly.
Yeah, especially about the role of civil society. Now it's your turn. Yes. Thank you, Eka.
Thank you very much, and indeed a very interesting presentation. I have a question. It was also mentioned previously that sanctions are not particularly effective, and I also believe that who they impact mostly is the old money and the Russian population in general. Is there anything from your point of view as a recommendation that Western world can do in terms of sanctions or other actions that would be effective to restrict those channels of financing that actually matter?
I have one idea but it's not about decision making again. Lots of the time, Western journalists interview Vladimir Putin, and their questions are always horrible. It's horrible. Every interview for the last 20 years was horrible, with some little exceptions of people who are trying to ask questions during the press conference. For instance, Ukrainian journalists were asking really good questions. But when you have one-on-one interview with Vladimir Putin, and there is a Western journalist experience, we're not talking even about Tucker Carlson these days. Yeah. Some really experienced, distinguished journalists, and their questions are horrible. So please consult with us first. If you have 1 hour with Vladimir Putin, we will provide you millions of questions that will make this 1 hour uncomfortable for Vladimir Putin. It's not an answer to your question, really. But I think there must be some, brains exchange in this situation.
Show us the context of Andrei one more time. Yeah, thank you. I guess, the last question. Oh, okay, 2 questions. Is it okay? I just didn't know. Is there any other session here?
No.
Oh, no, okay. So we can ask questions. Continue. Yes, Mohammed, and then you. Yeah. First, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and all the interventions in the panel. It was really interesting to see. And actually, it's a pattern. So, talking about the foreign agents law and all of that, it's the shrinking civic space. I'm Tunisian, and we are facing the same problems coming in now. And also, so I'm thinking about this. There's like this foreign CSOs being foreign agents. From my experience, I see that it comes a lot. It starts with these populist laws. The real foreign agents are those that are on social media. So you have a lot of fake profiles which are funded. And I remember because I focus a lot on West Africa, and there were leaked documents from Wagner spending around $1 million in November 2019 only on social media propaganda. And we talk a lot about like anti-fake news laws, which are then used by authoritarian regimes to actually put CSOs in jail. But it would be interesting to track basically these fake profiles and then try to find the sources of money. So track those that are really funded by this. And because I feel like there is this whole space that's really under-regulated, and there is money flowing there. It's not really captured by corruption. It's not really captured by other things. But I'm curious if in Georgia, like before the foreign agent law, if there was kind of this kind of propaganda as well. I know that there's a lot of social media propaganda playing into the Ukraine-Russia war, like Israel, Gaza now, and like all of this. Like a lot of it is happening through social media, especially as a journalist. I mean, you go to facts and everything, but we say like the lies take the lift while the truth takes the stairs. So it takes a long time to debunk all of this information. So just to see if you have any reflections on the social media space.
May I clarify? Is it a question to Eka? Because it's about Georgia or to anybody.
I was curious if in Georgia there was this kind of, before the law, there was a lot of like stigmatization of CSOs saying, yes, they are foreign agents on the social media.
A lot of.
And also, like if anyone else wants to respond to that.
Thank you, Mohammed. Would you like to start?
Of course. So it did not start in one day, even in 1 week. So 4 years it was happening, especially with the watchdog groups. So the narrative is simple. So that actually the EU and the US is investing the dirty money in Georgian politics through the NGOs who are involved in revolutions. You know, they want to organize revolution and some actions against the government to remove this government from or the ruling party from the government, or they use this money to conduct the LGBT propaganda. So that's kind of the whole narrative. So one is targeting the rural areas, the conservative groups, and the not educated groups. And the second one is for the general public. And of course, I mean, also putting the posters on the street. Like my posters were, for instance, 1 year ago, it was on each and every metro station, entrances of the metro station, and each and every big buildings in bigger cities in Georgia, saying that I'm like spy and terrible person and this and that. So it's I think it's the playbook, right? So the same was in other countries. So.
Yeah, it is. Are you satisfied?
Yeah. It's not so fun, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Matthew Murray. I'm a professor at Columbia University. I have two questions for Andre. One's very quick and simple, I hope, which is, do you think you can get me an hour interview with Vladimir Putin?
I cannot.
Yeah, just a little humor here. No, the deeper question is, I think each of you has touched to some extent on whether systemic corruption in Russia was an actual cause of war against Ukraine. Was it a secondary cause, immediate cause, long-term cause, primary cause? These are really important issues for everybody in this room to be thinking about. And it just so happened that on the day of this expanded invasion into Ukraine, Alexei Navalny was on trial again and raised his hand during that trial and said, despite the fact that he was going to face years more in prison, that indeed the war was being conducted to divert public attention from corruption. And so the studies of the causes of war include huge literature around just the diversion of public opinion as a cause, right? Domestic problems at home can lead to war. So all I'm saying is that each of you teased it out a bit, and I would hope that each of you would continue to go deeper. Because once we understand it better in terms of what it caused and what it didn't cause, and how it's now been displaced by this other narrative about nationalism and all that stuff, I think we'll be better in a position to stop the war. That's just sort of my humble view. And I just was very encouraged to hear you all talk about it and hope that you will continue to work on it and study it.
Thank you, Matt. So would you like to react? Or
I think I agree with Alexei Navalny, but I think he could say something like, to divert Russian society from the lack of free press or from the lack of social standards in the country, the same way he focused on corruption. Corruption is his main feature. That's why he talks a lot about corruption, but it's not the only problem in Russia, indeed. But in my opinion, anti-corruption investigations do not help Ministry of Defense, for instance, because currently corruption is not a bug in the system, but a feature. And even if you fire a corrupt minister, another one will take place who will also be corrupt, because system cannot allow a genuine person to be in charge of decision making.
I would like to say thank you to all our panelists. Thank you, Andrei. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Eka. Thank you, Vlad. And to all our participants. And if you have any other questions, we can continue in a personal way. Have a nice evening. Thank you so much. Sorry, I forgot to mention, there are still printed versions of the report, and if you need it, you can take it here in the first row.